What I want to do with this session is give first-time buyers an idea of the overall process, what we do from the beginning to the end. Sometimes it can take a couple of years, but don't stress, we'll go through it all. There's two parts to it. There's the pre-purchase part and there's actually the purchasing part when you're signing the contracts. So the pre-purchase part has a lot of work to do. Now we want to talk about the pre-purchase or the background work. So it starts off with a deposit. So woohoo! You saved over the last couple of years and have a deposit. Do you have enough deposit? It really depends on what your income is and what property that you want. Now that sounds a bit cryptic. So what am I talking about? Well, I'll give you a guideline. So for somebody in Sydney, usually a lot of the younger people would buy a unit. So a unit, I would say somewhere between 650,000 to 700,000. And ideally you want to be able to have a minimum of 10%. The more, the better. But as a starting point, you want 10%. Now, your deposit doesn't just have to be savings. Some people are very lucky to maybe have an inheritance or are gifted or have a loan from their parents that can be used for a deposit. The second part is getting a pre-approval. So this means that you can go and have the confidence that you can get a loan. I usually tell people to just have a quick chat with me beforehand to see how far they are, if they're on track for the deposit and the income they have, and if it actually marries up to what they want to do. Sometimes I have some strategies as well. So what loans that we're looking at that I usually focus on if it's going to be a family guarantee. So this is where your parents can help a little bit by using their house as security. It's just to cover the little bit of deposit. It means you don't pay mortgage insurance, a little bit of help. And sometimes if you don't have that, we can use what's called a home deposit loan. So this is where you can actually get a loan that actually helps you bridge the gap of your deposit so you don't pay mortgage insurance. And that also helps you be able to get a little bit more of a deposit for a house. So that's what we really want to focus on. The details such as fixed rates, variable rates, all those details, probably not going to be as relevant until you actually find the property. At this point, you also want to have a little bit of research done of first home buyer schemes, if there's any concessions with stamp duty or any grants. What you need to do is keep updated with that because they do change quite often. When you need some help with concessions and grants for first home buyers, just feel free to reach out to me at that point. So now that you have that piece of paper that says that you have a loan pre-approval, you can start looking for properties. Now, when you start looking for properties, I'll give you a couple of tips. The first thing is have a list of what your priorities are. Know which area you want to go in and what sort of budget. So that's what the pre-approval is for. Another recommendation I do is once you've got your upper limit, do not look at houses that are higher than that. The reason I say that is that anybody that does it gets really depressed at going down and often will actually resort to not buying or changing it, having to wait a fair bit of time. Keep a tight budget. Do not look at properties above that. That is my recommendation. Or if you want something more spacious, maybe move further away. So what are you looking at? Location, location, location. I think you've heard that many times before. It's quite common in our industry. And that is one thing, no matter what you do, you cannot change, is where your unit is, for example, where your home is. Close to schools, close to trains, in a bad area, in a good area, near the beach. Location is something that you cannot change. You can build a new house, you can have different views, what have you, make extensions, but the location is very difficult to change. What'll happen is you'll start having to make decisions of what's going to be your priority. So whether it's how big the unit is, whether it has a garage, you need to be very crystal clear on what a priority is, especially if you're buying as a couple. What is really helpful is to have family, friends, or people that actually know what to look at properties with property inspections. So I'm not just talking about the people that go knocking on walls to, I don't know what they do when they knock on walls and check that there's a wall there. But I'm talking about really what things to look at, looking at the maintenance of a property. If you're looking at Strata, one of the things that I would look at is the windows, because windows is it's a responsibility of Strata to some extent. And if a strata's not being maintained, windows is one of the things that usually gets passed down and doesn't get looked after. And garages is another thing. Whether them, mowing the lawn, for example. For a house, what are you looking at? Are the taps working? Can you see mold? Is there signs of termites? That sort of thing. So you want somebody that has some idea of what to look at and even what things to ask a real estate agent. So that's the sort of information that you want to have. If you don't have that, there's courses and there's things that I can help people and guide them through what they need to be able to do at inspections to have a good idea if the property is right for them. The next one is finding that property. So you found a property that you want. What I strongly recommend to you is that you find at least 3 properties and have them in order of preference. Now this will be important. It's important when it comes in terms of negotiations and be able to size up. I understand usually people just fall in love with this property and that's all they want. But I still tell my customers, I know that this is your priority, but I still want you to have a number 2 and a number 3. Once you've decided on that property, what do? You send it to a solicitor. So a solicitor or conveyancer. A conveyancer is not necessarily a solicitor, but specialises in property law. And what you want them to do is check the contract. Now, in most cases, it's pretty standard, but you need to be able to check that it is okay and everything's okay. As my solicitor says, solicitors need to feel important and they will always add little bits and pieces and you need to have a solicitor to check it. I could give you a story where a person has purchased a property without getting a solicitor to look at the contract. What ended up happening is they didn't have an occupancy certificate. Now, what does that mean? It means that they could not live in the property. It wasn't deemed livable at this point in time. It looked fine to them, but there's a certain piece of paper that the solicitor would have known is required before they purchased. So they survived in the end, but they would have spent a year's worth of rent because they couldn't move into that property. And they hadn't planned for it because they didn't know what the contract meant. So please go to a solicitor. If you need help, I may be able to help you depending on where you are. I have a fair few contacts. Okay, you've done all that now. You've seen the solicitor. The solicitor said, yeah, it's good to go. Any issues and you are ready to buy. Yes. There's 2 types of buying, and it's not up to you to decide, really. It's really up to the real estate agent and the owner of the property to decide how they're going to sell. There's 2 types, private treaty, and everybody goes, but private treaty, what does that mean? It's basically it's not an auction. So private treaty or auction. And that's when you're actually talking to the real estate agent. So if we focus on the private treaty first, start negotiating the price. The first tip I tell people, especially in a hot market, is please don't offer like 100,000 or 200,000 under the asking price. You must be have some idea of the market to have some sort of reasonable offer if you want to be taken seriously by a real estate agent. And that's okay. I've helped lots of people where they've done it and then I've actually had called the real estate agent and actually gave them a bigger picture. So don't panic. At any point, you don't have to panic. But please know the market and know what a reasonable and fair offer is. If it's a hot market, and you can tell by certain signs, for example, how long the property is on the market for. So if the market is turning over quite quickly, it's a hot market. So if property is getting sold within the first 2 weeks, that is a sign of a hot property. If it's taking 3 months in something like a city, it's probably a cooler period. You've got more room to negotiate. Ways of knowing what the market is quite often you'll get reports. So I give my customers a Coral Logic report, which gives you what the prices went for, a brief idea on the history on the market. Now, and again, in a hot market, I was giving it to my customers, but it was also adding to it that it's actually, the data is months behind. It's a few months behind, and the market was moving so fast. So there's nothing to substitute you knowing what the market is doing. So you really need to know what the market is doing. When you have actually got the price, you need to be able to act immediately. So you've got to be able to say, I'll sign today. One of the worst things that you can do is make an offer and then hesitate because somebody else will take it over. This is especially in a hot market. Again, in a cooler market, you've got a lot more flexibility. So, okay, you've negotiated the price, you're pretty fair, the real estate agent has got the permission from the vendor or the seller to sell the property at your price. What do? You go in, actually you don't even have to go in anymore, but you sign the contracts and you put down 0.25% of the property. Now I'm talking about the Sydney market here. That is not refundable. Now you'll usually have 5 to 10 days. It's supposed to be 5 days, but banks and lenders work so slow that it had to be pushed out to 10 days. So that's when you do your checks and balances, you get your unconditional approval from the bank. So once you've signed the contract, it goes to the solicitor will start doing some checks. The other one goes to your mortgage broker. The mortgage broker will focus on getting an unconditional approval for you. So if your head's spinning at this point in time, don't panic. You will have, I'm usually there with my clients speaking to them and going through the whole process. There's usually somebody that will actually help you through. Your solicitor will tell you stuff, your mortgage broker. I will strongly recommend that you do inspections, and a good solicitor will keep on nagging at you until you do your due diligence, your inspection reports. So for a house, you get a pest and building inspection report. I cannot tell you how important it is to do your own one. I can give you real live examples where there was a property going for auction for one of my customers. The seller gave a builder report and it looked okay. And I said to them, if you're serious about this, you must actually get a pest and building inspection report. They got their own one. The difference between the vendors and theirs was black and white. And the damage that in that property, it was like $200,000, which they didn't have the money to be able to fix. But I tell you, at that auction, it went for something like $600,000 over the reserve price. They moved away from it and they did not buy it and were very grateful. But I can tell you, I have no doubt in my mind that those people that bought it do not know they've got $200,000 worth of damages that they have to pay for to rectify that property. So please do your own pest and building inspections. If you're buying into a unit, check out the Strata report. Get a Strata inspection, which also can be performed and organised by a solicitor. In there, you're looking at defects of the strata community. If there's special levies, now special levy means you're going to have to pay for damages. I can tell you with a lot of the new buildings that are being built in Sydney, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's not uncommon to have units taking the builders to court. And you just need to know that, because sometimes, actually a lot of the times, you have to pay a fair bit in court fees or what have you to be able to get all the damages rectified. So please, that's an important part. Make sure you do your due diligence in that time frame. Okay, now you've got your home loan approval, unconditional approval, your solicitor's happy, you're happy with the inspections, you pay the remaining of the 10% deposit. At that point, there's no going back. You can negotiate, and quite often I will only negotiate a 5% deposit, and most people are quite happy with that at this point in time, just so you can keep a little bit in the bank for a while. But once you do that, you're on your way. You'll actually just sign the mortgage loan documents, and then all you do is wait for settlement. Settlement is when you get your keys, and that's usually 6 weeks from signing your contract. And now we'll talk about auctions. So auctions can be quite different and can be a little bit more stressful and a lot more pressure at certain times. Auctions are usually synonymous with hot markets. So typically if there's a lot of hot markets and the market is moving, people will put it to auction and people will try to outbid each other. With auctions, it's usually got a lot of competition with a lot of people putting their bids in, and it goes to the highest offer. Now, I can tell you that you can actually put an offer beforehand. it's quite a bit of an issue, but it would still be under auction conditions. Auction conditions means that you put a 10% down and there's no going back. So you cannot change your mind. You do not have a chance to check if your home loan approval is okay and get an unconditional beforehand. You don't have the chance to do any inspections. Please, again, as I said before, do not rely on the vendor's inspections. And I know it can be a bit stressful for people that are going to a lot of auctions, that they're putting a lot of money down. So there is a technique that I talk to my clients about how to actually win at auctions. Basically, you've just got to know exactly what it's going for and what the market is. And if somebody says it's $300,000 or $1.3 million, you make sure you've got $200,000 or $300,000 extra, because a lot of the real estate agents, despite it being illegal, will underprice it. And that's how they get a lot of people in, which gets a lot of the pressure. So once you've got the 10%, that's it. So you get your contract, just say you've won it, you get that contract, it's signed, goes to your solicitor, goes to your mortgage broker, and everything happens fast. So please have your inspection done beforehand, do your due diligence beforehand, have your solicitor look at the contract beforehand, so that when you actually sign the contract, you're good. And I think I said before that a good solicitor conveyancer will actually do a fair few inspections of the contract beforehand in a hot market. It's pretty much a requirement. And then once you've done that, you go back to signing the documents, and again, you get the keys at settlement, which is again about 6 weeks from the time that you actually purchase. So that's a big picture view of the home loan process. And for a first home buyer, it can be overwhelming, but usually you get people, and I would strongly have people standing next to you to help you along your home ownership journey. I mean, it is a big and stressful decision, and it's a very exciting decision as well. So because there's so much money involved and you don't want to make mistakes, it's good to have someone that knows what they're doing walking beside you. Feel free to reach out at any point if you have any questions.